Well, we've got one last thing here. We need to issue a correction from our last podcast. So, last podcast, we were talking about a book that was released by J.K. Rowling under the pen name Robert Galbraith. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but anyway, Galbraith. We made a mention saying that Robert Galbraith was the inventor of conversion therapy. So I actually, we have Dylan here that's going to provide a little bit more context, but I just pulled up a quick kind of, just a hot, kind of quick second to give a little brief background of Robert Galbraith Heath. So technically, Robert would have been called Robert Heath, which might be a little bit, could be easily misconstrued or whatever. So we just wanted to issue a correction that technically it would be Robert Heath, and maybe there's not such a high chance of association with J.K. Rowling wanting to name for her pen name, her fictitious pen name, rather, the guy who made conversion therapy. But
Well, it's,
anyway,
it's her real pen name.
I mean, I get that, but it's first name, middle name, not really
Yeah.
first name, last name. So it's really kind of like a loose association. Um, so still kind of suspicious, but a loose association. Anyway, Heath founded the Department of Psychiatry of Neurology at Tulane University in New Orleans in 1949 and remained its chairman until 1980. He performed many experiments there involving electrical stimulation of the brain via surgically implanted electrodes. He placed deep brain stimulation, DBS, electrodes into the brains of more than 54 patients. Indeed, he has been cited as the first, or one of the first researchers to have placed electrodes deep into the brains of living human patients. It has been suggested that his work has financed in part or was financed in part by the government, particularly the CIA or U.S. military. In 1972, he claimed to have converted a homosexual man to heterosexuality using DBS. Heath also experimented with the drug bulbocapnine to induce stupor and LSD using prisoners in the Louisiana State Penitentiary as experimental subjects. He worked on schizophrenia patients, which he regarded as an illness with a physical basis. Today's Heath work is considered highly controversial and is only rarely used as reference material. So, given that kind of just brief situation or topic, I wanted to actually talk with Dylan because he has a few things prepared, in regards to the history of conversion therapy, and I think it'd be kind of cool just to hear kind of a little bit more of a researched mind on this particular subject. So go ahead and let us know what you got there, Dylan.
Number one, I did create a paper back in my. I am a psychology major from Culver Stockton College in Canton, Missouri. I do have a degree in Bachelor's of Science in Psychology, and I am currently in school for my master's in Master's of Arts in Mental Health Counseling. So, with that said, the thing with conversion therapy is that the big thing that we need to realize about conversion therapy, for one, it's not it's not a real it's a scientifically proven method of healing. It isn't. It never was. And just to go into the scientific aspect of it, when we talk about conversion therapy, conversion therapy has actually been used not only here in the United States, but it's been used in other places as well. Like for example, there was a huge, and by huge I mean disgustingly huge event going on in Africa, known as the 11 Aversion Project. So in short, the 11 Version Project was taking place in Africa, it specifically in the south part of Africa and in Western Africa. And what was going on was there was political turmoil between the two. And not only was there turmoil, there was a lot of biological warfare going on during this time.
Yeah.
And what was going on was there was a lot of use of conversion therapy, of course, and not only that, but there was also a lot of forced sex changes amongst the people and the soldiers. So this was known as the apartheid era, which was an era of segregation between, of course, the South and the West. And the apartheid, and the word apartheid means apart, is what it means. So with that said, what they were doing to the so it was mainly South Africa, according to what I found from Kaplan 2001. The SADF, or the South African Defense Force, um, and minority of the cases of the patients that they had were also drug addicted patients as well, but majority of them were just either soldiers or citizens that were considered LGBTQ.
Yeah.
And what they did to them was, not only did they use conversion therapy, they also used forced sex changes, but it was mainly on the females that got the sex changes. The males didn't really get the sex change operations. It was mainly for the females, but the males, however, were very much forced into conversion therapy against their will. For example, they were forced to watch pornographic films and images of women. They were also forced, and what happens was that they showed erection towards homosexual images of porn. They would be shocked in shock treatment until they were converted. So that just goes to tell you, needless to say, that how unethical and how just inhumane that is.
Right.
And the why this is called the 11 version project is because, when the investigation was first launched, it had ties to this doctor who was part of the SADF, named Dr. Aubrey Levin. I'm sorry. And Dr. Aubrey Levin was apparently a psychologist who had multiple accusations coming to him that involved with the Levin Diversion Project. He ran War 22 at one military hospital, and I think it's a really weird name, Vutarikogi, I think is how you say it, which had a villainous and diabolical reputation from the get go, anyways. Not to mention, he wasn't alone on this. 24 other doctors were tied with Dr. Levin's Levin Reversion Project. So that's one example of how inhumane this so-called conversion therapy is. It's very inhumane, and also it's been shown by data in case studies that it has never worked. Another example here, there's another person that people would argue is the inventor of the conversion therapy, and his name is Dr. Joseph Nicolosi. Um, as I stated in my paper, it isn't clear who founded the conversion therapy, but many would argue that it was Dr. Joseph Nicolosi. And the reason why that they would give credit to him is because not only did he also perform conversion therapy himself, he also created a book called A Parent's Guide to Preventing Homosexuality and Shame Attachment Loss, the practical work of reparative therapy. He also had, supposedly, I don't know how this was peer reviewed, because there's obviously a lot of bias, and in peer reviewed articles there isn't supposed to be any bias of any sort. But
Yeah.
apparently he had peer reviewed articles on his experimentation of curing the urge of homosexuality, supposedly.
Hmm.
So with that said, he was known, and because of all of this, he was known as a pioneer of history of psychology due to his works in conversion therapy. He worked at the Thomas Aquinas Clinic as a clinical director and was one of the three founders of the National Association for Research and Therapy of Homosexuality, also known as NARTH. Dr. Nicolosi did pass away. He passed away 5 years ago in 2006, 17. And on his gravestone he was known as the Warrior of Truth because of his achievements. So with that said, the reason why people are giving him credit to be the founder of conversion therapy is because, not only because of his accomplishments, he did create NARTH, but however, NARTH, the other employees that worked at NARTH, aside from Dr. Nicolosi himself, they actually did not do. They were actually reported to not have done any conversion therapy of their own. It was only Dr. Nicolosi himself. And that's just society having, shown its tendency to give recognition to those who do a certain task better instead of giving credit to the discoverer. So, but like I said, there's really no concrete evidence or proof as to who founded the conversion therapy thing here.
Sure.
But it is worth mentioning that Dr. Joseph Nicolosi could possibly be one of them, for the fact that, again, he created his own association. He actually does have a lot of he does have credibility in his background, but what he did wasn't exactly, of course, ethical. And a lot of the stuff that he apparently he did research on and created, he didn't exactly have a lot of scientific and empirical data to actually solidify his data to make it more credible and more believable. So with that said, the APA, overall, and just in case for those who don't know who the APA are, the APA is the American Psychological Association. They are like the authority on psychology in America. They
Right.
make the rules about counseling, what type of therapies, the code of ethics, code of conduct, all of that. That's all created by the APA. And the American Psychological Association is the heart of all psychology. It is. And not to mention, they've created systems as well as knowledge, as well as they were also part of scientific discoveries, research, and also the holder of every historical archive that involves psychology and any other experiments, whether they were ethical experiments or unethical experiments. So so this will, of course, ask the question: what does the APA say about conversion therapy? Well, conversion therapy, according to Kennedy in 2015, conversion therapy is looked at not only as an unethical form of therapy, but it's also an illegitimate and as well as a very useless therapy in APA standards. The APA
Right.
reports that the conversion therapy has no credible scientific evidence, and due to its incredibility, the therapy is no longer being used by behavioral health experts. It's also worth mentioning that those who do struggle with sexual identity with or without experiencing the conversion therapy prior has had detrimental effects to overall mental well-being. The conversion therapy was never shown to actually work, and therefore also lacks scientific support. There was never any scientific evidence to start that gender identity and sexual preferences can be manipulated by means of therapy or medicine. There never was, and there still isn't, as far as I'm aware. That is. The conversion therapy has done more harm than it has done anything else due to reports of increased depression and suicidal tendencies in LGBTQ adolescents who have gone through conversion therapy. One of the APA members, Director Judith M. Glassgold, advises parents to do not reject their children due to sexual orientation or identity, regardless of religious beliefs. This also has a very degrading and very crippling impact on the children's mental health and mental stability. As a matter of fact, the Obama administration during Barack Obama's presidency has classified this practice as a fraudulent practice, and was, last time I checked when I did this paper, they were looking to have conversion therapy banned in the United States, in all 50 states. So with that said, um, there was also, and of course, religion had, of course, played a big role in why homosexuality and bisexuality and transgenderism was, of course, looked so poorly.
You know, with the
Well, the
stigma.
thing is, though, yeah, the stigma, exactly. But the thing is, though, there was a person that I also found during my research that actually looked into that particular part of the Bible about homosexuality in the Bible. And actually, for number one, um, yeah, I'm trying to find it here. Because I asked, because in one of my segments is called "Is homosexuality a sin?" Well, as we all know, it's a sin simply because of the fact that it's considered an abomination,
Who
and because back
who
in the
cares if
biblical
it's a
time,
sin?
and
Is what I'll ask.
and back in biblical times, some of them did use that to worship gods, deities, or demon gods, whatever you want to call them. So therefore, they were persecuted or even killed or shunned by society for this because it was considered witchcraft. But however, Um, of course, Christianity has, of course, done some pretty evil things back in its day too. So, of course, there is the oxymoron here. But however, the question to ask is homosexuality truly a sin according to the Bible, no matter what the situation is? And is it always a sin, no matter what? Well, it says in the book of Leviticus, chapter 18, verse 23, that no man shall ever have intercourse with another male because it is an abomination. But that's all it says. It doesn't, the scripture does not specify or elaborate as to why it is, other than the fact that it was because people used it for rituals. That was it. That was literally the only thing that they were standing on. So according to News in 2015, the text throughout the Holy Bible does not condemn homosexual couples for just being homosexual. And not to mention, News also mentions that the Apostle Paul constantly condemns homosexuality between males, but barely speaks about anything about women, as if homosexuality between women compared to men does not offend.
Because
Doesn't that?
lesbians are hot.
So that right there is another hypocrisy. So why is the Bible shaming, constantly harping on men to not do so, but they barely spoke about women? Yeah, that's a little interesting right there. But and now while majority of the while majority of cultures, or wherever you want to call them, have rejected the very idea of homosexuality and transgenderism, there were a couple that did accept it and actually very widely embraced it, like the Native American tribes. Native American tribes were even one of the civilizations that Christianity was responsible of pretty much decimating, because they thought, hey, you guys don't worship the same God as us, and you're doing a bunch of witchcraft, and we actually like it here, so we're going to take your land away, okay? But if you give up your way of living, you can join us. And as you know, the Indians didn't go down. The Indians, I'm sorry, the natives did not. They did not go down without a fight, obviously.
Right.
But however, what the natives did when they had people in their tribe that were LGBTQ, um, they were called two-spirited people. Two-spirit people. According to Shepard and Mayo Jr. in 2013, those who were two-spirited were actually very highly revered in their tribes. They were considered one of the most gifted of their tribes, because those who possessed two spirits often became great shamans or priests of their tribe. The two spirited often played crucial roles in their tribes, from being the best medics to the best spiritualists. And they also were hunters, and they also did cooking of the meat too, of what they hunted. They could do the men's job and the women's job at the same time. That's why they were so highly valued, because they could do both women tasks and men tasks. Because they did have somewhat of gender roles, but they didn't exactly harp on it and exaggerate it like we do in our society to an extent. So with that said, they pretty much rejected the concept of gender roles, because no matter what the member of their tribe is identified as, it was all based on being accepted of others and putting their talents to good use for the betterment of their tribe. That's all there is to it, and that's how it should be for any civilization that exists through this world. So, in conclusion, conversion therapy is not a credible it's not scientifically credible. It's quite fraudulent, and it is quite faulty. And in fact, it has killed more people because of suicide attempts than it has helped. Not to mention, it is the only recorded therapy in American psychology history to have no scientific data or backup or any form of good outcomes compared to others, like personal centered therapy, or PCT, or existential therapy, ET. So with that said, um, because mainly conversion therapy was pretty much praying the gay away, and they also starved these people too. So because they said that it would humble their souls, and it would also put them in an hallucination to convince them that they are not gay, they are straight. Because if they are gay, they are bound to be condemned for all eternity. So again, that goes to show that it's, compared to other therapies out there, it's very unethical. They're starving them. They're depriving them of basic human needs, just so they don't be in love with the same gender. And at the same time, pornography is supposed to be a sin, but they're using pornography to make them into something they're not.
All right. Well, thanks,
And
Dylan, for that. That's
mm,
quite a bit of information there. But yeah, I figured it would be worthwhile to kind of touch on that. Very often in the mainstream, a lot of very detailed topics, like what Dylan just shared with us, get kind of glossed over. And that's why sometimes it's worthwhile to have somebody who's done the research to kind of, broaden that scope a little bit and provide a little bit more information as to the history of it, as well as, what the impacts have been and, that type of thing. So.